Hello, welcome to Chapter 1, Collecting Data, Part A, Sampling Methods. In the past, we saw the concept of population and sample. Let's introduce now some new terms. To keep it simple, we will say that a parameter is a characteristic in a population, while a statistic is a characteristic in a sample. For example, in my class I have 30 students. The average age is 23 years old, so the parameter mean, or average, is 23. Now I pick a sample of 5 students, and the average age of these 5 students is 20 years old. This 20 is the value of the statistic mean in this particular sample. The sample frame is the set of individuals that could be selected for the sample. Going back to our example from the previous class, if our population is the set of registered voters, how do we select the 1,000 individuals of our sample? We can call 1,000 phone numbers randomly selected. In this case, the sample frame is the set of all individuals with a phone number. If a registered voter does not have a phone number, they don't have any chance to be part of the sample. As you can imagine, we want the sample frame to be as big and as similar to the population as possible. The sampling plan or sampling method is the method used to pick the sample. We will go in this class over the most common ones. Explanatory variable is just the name we give the independent variable in statistics, the x. In a similar way, the response variable is the dependent variable, the y. A confounding variable is any variable that could affect the response but is not the explanatory. The research question is the question we want to solve with our study. It must be clear, precise, and concise. Ideally, it should mention the variables or the parameters we are interested in. Let's see this with an example. We want to study the relationship between smoking and lung capacity. The research question would be, does smoking affect lung capacity? Or is smoking associated to lower lung capacity? Notice that this question is about cause and effect, what we call causation, while this other question is just about association. We will speak about this important difference in the second part of this chapter. Both questions are clear, precise, and concise. Both include the explanatory and the response variables. The explanatory variable is smoking and the response is lung capacity. I have seen that some students struggle to distinguish one from the other, so I will give here some ideas. There are cases in which the distinction is arbitrary. If you study the relationship between height and weight, anyone could reasonably be considered the explanatory or the response, because in a person, height and weight have similar natures. However, if you are studying the relationship between height and age, then usually age is the explanatory and height is the response. Why? Because it makes more sense that the age goes first and the height follows. As a child gets older, he gets taller. When we work with time, time is usually the independent variable, the explanatory. Going back to our main example, it makes more sense to think that first you decide if you want to smoke, and then as a response, your lung capacity might change. The point is that there are also other variables that could make the difference in terms of lung capacity. We call them confounding variables. Age, gender, and lifestyle are just 3 examples. There are as many as you can imagine. What researchers usually do is considering the main ones and controlling for them. In this chapter, we will see how. Be aware that any variable can play the role of explanatory, response, or confounding, so you must learn to identify the variables looking at the context. For example, in this study, age is a confounding variable, but in the other study mentioned before about age and height, age was the explanatory. In another study, it could even be the response, so you really have to think of the context. Finally, we want to point that some variables are numerical or quantitative and some variables are categorical or qualitative. Sometimes this classification is based on how we measure the values of the variable. For example, smoking can be categorical if its possible values are yes or no. Yes or no are categories, but it can also be numerical if we measure it with number of cigarettes a day. Age is clearly numerical, gender and lifestyle are clearly categorical, lung capacity is usually numerical because we measure it with units of volume or force. Let's solve now exercise 1. When it comes to exercises, it's better if you try to solve each on your own before watching my solution. You can pause the video and try now, or even better, you can print the handout beforehand and do it in advance. A. Find the research question. It couldn't be any easier because it is explicitly stated between quotes. Are wealthy people in the USA healthier than lower income people in the USA? Very often the question is not so explicitly given and you need to figure it out from the more general description of the study. B. What are the explanatory and response variables? Remember that these variables are usually included in the research question, so you know where to find them. The explanatory variable is wealth or income, and the response variable is health. A common error that I see many students is saying explanatory variable wealthy people in the USA. This is not correct. The problem is that wealthy people in the USA is not the name of a variable. It is more a segment of the population or a value of the variable, but the variable is simply wealth. Remember, the variable needs to vary from individual to individual. You must be able to speak of my wealth, your wealth, his wealth, her wealth. You cannot speak of my wealthy people in the USA. And the same applies to the response. Notice that this research question clearly defines the population of interest, the USA. Letter C. Possible confounding variables. As many as you can reasonably imagine. What variables could affect health other than wealth? Job, genetics, lifestyle, age. Letter D. This is an example of convenience sample. Researchers take advantage of what is easily accessible to them. Here we are including the definition of convenience sample. Is it biased? Students usually answer this question very nicely. Some object that since all the researchers are in the same university, probably the malls they visit are also close to the university. So even when 40 students are collecting data, maybe all the data is collected from the same 3 or 4 malls. This is unreasonable for a study that pretends to get conclusions about the whole country. Others say that really poor people will not buy in a mall, so the lowest incomes will be underrepresented. Others object that you cannot identify wealthy or low-income people by their outfit, so you cannot interview the 10 wealthy and the 10 low-income. All these objections are okay. This sampling plan is very unrigorous. There is an objection that I usually don't hear and is indeed important. Usually, we don't want to apply these surveys face-to-face in a public place. That could be too much of what we call a voluntary response survey. Why? Because in a public place, certain types of people will be more inclined to stop by and answer your questions. It might even depend on who you are and how you look like. And these types of people will be overrepresented in the study. For example, if a man with his wife and 2 children is in the mall because they went to the movies, they won't want to waste their family time answering your questions. But if the man is single and went to the movies alone, he might be pleased to talk to you for 5 minutes. This is what we call a self-selected sample. And a self-selected sample is what we always want to avoid. How can we prevent a voluntary response survey from becoming a self-selected sample? Here are some ideas. First, make it mandatory. Of course, if you make it mandatory, it's no longer voluntary response. In most cases, this is not possible. Second, make it as impersonal and free of connotations as possible. Third, make the answering easy, so everybody has equal facility to answer. phone calls are a good option. Fourth, offer a reward, an online gift card, tickets for the movies, something simple that attracts everybody. Some restaurants are giving you a coupon for a cookie or for a coffee if you place your feedback online. Last question. Are there research studies in which a convenience sample could be appropriate? The answer is yes. For example, if I want to study about the learning of statistics, I can take advantage of the fact that I teach statistics. Maybe I will have to question how far can I extend my conclusions, because maybe I am working only with students from the same college, but I still can use them for my study. Being close to the information or to the source of information does not imply that you cannot use it. Let's go to exercise 2.